CityCast Pittsburgh is supported by Fulton Commons. If you're looking for a gorgeous co-working space with lots of light and some truly wonderfully funky decor, check out Fulton Commons on the north side. The historic but very well renovated old school building is deep in the neighborhood by a park, tucked away but still super close to anywhere you want to be. They've got offices and common spaces. It's perfect for organizations or individuals, and they even have a shared food production kitchen on site. So there's lots of food-related events for their members. If this sounds like your dream co-working space, visit fultonpgh.org to request a tour. CityCast Pittsburgh is brought to you today by Barrel and Flow. It has been voted America's best brew festival by USA Today year after year, and I can completely see why. I have been before, and it just keeps getting better. This year is the 5th edition, and it's coming with a full week of events. So the rivers, our shores, so much of the Steel City being celebrated here. It begins with a commemorative vinyl release. There's a midweek day party, a boat ride, a business conference, and it culminates with a 9-hour beer festival celebrating Black culture through music, art, food, small business vendors, and over 75 breweries from all across the country. Check it out and buy your tickets today at barrelandflow.com. Today on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you listen to this show, you have heard us talk about the city budget, how it works, why it matters, and what happens when, as a city, we don't just lose track of our bills. We plan to spend more money than we know we're capable of bringing in. And that is not hyperbole. Pittsburgh's chief financial watchdog, the city controller, says we are already $24 million over budget for the first half of this year. So we brought her here to you to talk about what that means, like what's possible and what happens if all of Pittsburgh goes broke. It's Tuesday, August 5th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about.
I actually don't love politics. It's like a means to an end. I'm a nerd and I love government.
That sentence is giving big Leslie Knope vibes.
Oh, yes. My favorite show, Parks and Recs. I'm kidding.
Well, that's a good place to start. I am downtown with City Controller Rachel Heisler. Thank you so much for making time for us.
So nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am hoping that you might be able to help us explain our city's financial situation. I know it's been very tenuous for the last couple of years. How would you describe Pittsburgh right now? How healthy are we?
We are coming out of a global pandemic, like every major city in the country, and every major city in the world for that matter. And like most major cities, we are faced with a drastic change in revenue. In 2020, revenues were down in every city, depending on where you collect your revenue, whether it was from commuter taxes. And from our perspective, we took big hits on the parking tax and the amusement tax.
Meaning like people coming in to like go do fun things like Kennywood?
So within the city limits. So
right.
That's the first thing.
That's an example, but a bad one because it's not actually in the city.
Correct. People come to downtown and pay parking taxes, right? And you don't know you're paying a parking tax. You think you're paying
you're paying the meter, so to speak.
The meter, the garage, you're paying your lease. And that is taxed. And overnight, that revenue stopped coming in. I mean, we collect more than $50 million a year in parking taxes. And that number in 2020 was maybe 20 million because we got through almost all of Q1. And then our amusement taxes. So if you buy a ticket for sporting event, at a concert, you pay, again, you don't know you're paying it, but you pay
It's built into the price.
Correct. And so those revenue lines were drastically reduced literally overnight. And, coupled with that, we just saw a depression in economic activity, right? People weren't coming downtown. People were sitting at home, ordering things online, and, everybody was wearing masks. So what happened was the federal government in 2021, so less than a year into the pandemic, but, in the Biden administration, passed the American Rescue Plan Act. And the city of Pittsburgh received $335 million, which is almost half of an annual operating budget, and it was deposited once in 2020. Half of it was deposited in 2021, the other half in 2022, and it was literally that represents a once in a lifetime opportunity with federal funding.
Yeah.
The restrictions were not very stringent. We used about $50 million a year for 4 years to just dump it into the general operating fund. And then we used the other $150 million on special projects. We did a lot of lead line work, affordable housing projects, and that money is gone. We've spent it all. And we haven't spent all of it. It has to be encumbered by the end of 2024.
I was about to say, we had to spend it all.
Correct.
We were required.
Yeah. So all cities are dealing with what I am calling the ARPA hangover, because you had these inflated operating budgets, and now that money literally went away overnight. And it didn't. Of course, we spent it. So expenditures were higher in those 4 years as well. But it is a significant change in our finances, literally overnight. And when you couple that with the structural changes that have happened, so 25% of all city revenue comes from property taxes. So if you live in the city, you own your home, you pay property taxes. And if you're a renter, your landlord or property owner pays property taxes. 25% of that 25% is downtown. Now, if you owned a commercial property in downtown Pittsburgh in 2019, it was probably full, and it was worth a lot more than it is today, because right now it's probably 75% full if you're lucky, or half full.
And that's something we've talked about a lot on this show that I didn't realize until we started digging into this, that the worth of a skyscraper is not just the components of the building or the businesses that are in it. It has to do with the leasing and the tenants and whether anybody's actually inside that building on any given day. And if it goes down too much, then it's just not worth as much.
Correct. And we have seen, last year was actually probably the worst year in terms of refunds. We issued $33 million in property tax refunds last year because property owners had filed reassessment appeals in 2020, 2021, and 2022, and into 2023. And the courts finally basically caught up, right?
Yeah. And because it's a lot like as a homeowner, like your taxes they can stay the same year over year until you're like, wait, my house has changed a lot. I want you to check this again. And buildings are this kind of the same. And in this case, it was not going the city's way.
And these properties are worth less. I mean, they are not as full as they were before.
Which is wild because they are still pretty. They are still part of our skyline, part of our identity, but no one's in them. So they're not worth as much.
Right. And, you have to remember, too, that even companies who have retained their space in these downtown commercial buildings probably need less space than they did before. So we have seen there's something called the local services tax, and it's a tax that's levied on people who drive into the city. It's $52 a year, so it's $1 a week. And when you divide the total amount of money that we collect from that by 52, you can roughly estimate how many people are working in downtown Pittsburgh. In 2022, the approximate number of people paying that LST, local services tax, was 298,000 people, right?
Yeah. Almost 300,000 people come into work here roughly every day.
In 2024, that number is 264,000. And I don't think it's correct to assume that we have lost that many number of employees in Pittsburgh or in Western Pennsylvania. What I think is more likely is so many folks who in 2022 were still doing, were hybrid working or hadn't realized that they were going to stay at home permanently. And now they are, and they're not paying that $52 anymore. So that really demonstrates a change in downtown activity from Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. But as a bright spot, our parking taxes have totally rebounded, and so have our amusement taxes. So what that tells me is that life downtown, and downtown is the economic hub of Allegheny County, of
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, of Western Pennsylvania, right? So what we can tell from all of these numbers that people are actually back downtown, but they're coming for shows, they're coming for concerts, they're coming for games, they're coming at night to go out to dinner, but they aren't coming down Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. and leaving at 5. So I think a big priority for the next, 4 or 5 years is to figure out really what downtown Pittsburgh is going to look like in the decade ahead.
And I know there's been a lot of conversation about what downtown is and what it's supposed to be. But I mean, as you zoom out, I guess, like one of our big challenges is that as a population, we're just not growing, or we're not growing much.
Right.
I mean, is there anything that you would like to see us do differently or talk about differently? Is there something that maybe we do a little bit of, but you'd like to see more?
One thing that makes Pittsburgh particularly unique is the number of college students who come to Allegheny County.
We capture them for like at least 4 years.
Yes. And then they leave. I didn't grow up in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Harrisburg. I moved here in 2003 to attend the University of Pittsburgh, and I stayed. And I think we need to do a better job as a city and as a region to retain those folks, right? And we need to be a yes city. If you want to come here and put a rooftop garden on the top of one of these half-filled skyscrapers, how do we say yes, right? What can we do to allow someone the opportunity to create maybe a funky kind of business that you're like, well, that's weird. I don't know. But how do you say yes, right? Because if you want to come here and you can buy a house much more affordably than you can in a lot of peer-sized cities. Life here is wonderful for a lot of people, but how do we make sure that this next stage of growth is equitable? I think that that's really important, but I also think it's important that we're creative in how we're thinking about this.
So in this question of how healthy are we right now, it sounds like the answer is maybe it depends, and we're at an inflection point.
Totally. I've been using the word delicate because I just think there are so many. This is a really unique period, but what's very unique about this that differs from the 70s when the steel industry just contracted, what I wasn't born then, but what feels like overnight. But what's different is every city is dealing with this, right? And I do think it's like throwing something at the wall to see what sticks. We really need to be creative. Like Cleveland started a lot of this work in 2014, 2015, prior to the pandemic with their revitalization of downtown. And they've been pretty successful. There are grocery stores downtown. And I think the Target, I don't know why we don't talk about it. I actually think it's a huge win for downtown Pittsburgh. I mean, I grocery shop there. I don't know if you do, but those are things that are good indicators for the next 5 years. And we just need to do everything we can to see what will work for Pittsburgh.
Okay, so I love that we are dreaming a little. Like that feels like a fun place to start.
Yes.
What is your forecast on what's possible? Because you've talked a lot in the last year about a budget that is totally unsustainable and just how much money we are spending on overtime for some employees because we're just not fully staffed, like particularly police. You have said over and over and over that the bill coming due at the end of the year is just more than we can afford to pay.
So there is some level of offsetting, right? Because if you're spending more on overtime because you're spending less on staffing because you don't have enough bodies.
But overtime costs more.
It does. But if you're not paying the benefits for those people and instead are just paying an hourly rate of overtime, you can get to even. The problem is we are at staffing levels are not at 100%, but they're pretty high. And we're not budgeting for enough people to do this work, period, right? We need more than 800.
We're talking about like every city job, but public safety is the number one expenditure, I think, in the city budget.
Yeah.
Like just those salaries, their benefits, everything.
Yeah. So first, we are not going to reach our budget for salaries in the police bureau, for example. We just don't have enough cops. We have about 665 on the street. We're budgeted for 800. Part of that is retirements this year. Part of that is people who are out on like FMLA leave. The big issue is actually that there has been because of the dialogue that has gone on nationally around public safety, most police bureaus across the country are having issues with recruitment. But with overtime in particular, just to go back to that, we way under budgeted for what we were going to spend on overtime. So we're doing a quarter by quarter analysis. And at the end of Q1, which should be at 25%, we were at 34% of spending. So if you extrapolate that across the year, we could be off by upwards of $15 million, which you won't make up for because you saved money on staffing costs, right? Because this is a guesstimate based on what I've seen, but I think it's very likely that we will be at least $10 million over budget with overtime. And where that money comes from it immediately comes from other spending priorities that we can't meet, we won't be able to fulfill. And then it also comes from our rainy day account, right? The fund balance.
Which we do have a little bit of a surplus. If I'm reading this right, it's about $200 million,
Yep.
Which, folks might think of this as like a savings account. It sounds like a lot. But considering the size of our entire budget, around $785 million, I am guessing 200 is actually not that much money.
So we follow the GFOA recommendations.
What is that?
At 17%. So we are scheduled per our own budget to spend $130 million of that $200 million between now and the end of 2029.
So of the 200 we've got laying around, it's not laying around, but 130 that's already called.
We've already said we are going to spend that money.
For sure. And so now we have this $10 million in overtime on top of that.
Correct. And we have other issues too. I mean, we have the jock tax. Folks have heard.
We have talked about that so much because I think it's wild that it exists in our budget while it's tied up in court challenges.
Yes. So we've been collecting this since 2008. If we cannot collect the jock tax, the facility usage fee, will be out another $30 million. And so at that point, you're in a really tight position. And the reason that I have been so aggressive in this space and talking about these issues is I think we owe it to city residents and city visitors to explain what's going on. A lot of these changes are structural because of the changes to downtown, right? Like, I would love a magic wand to fix that solution, right? But I think we need to be aware that we're probably 5 to 10 years out of having any, more permanent solution to what downtown looks like. We're still in flux, right?
The world is different. We just have to adapt.
Yeah. And like I said, and that is something that every city's dealing with. But I do think we owe it to city residents to say, we need to figure out a way to grow and to increase revenue. And we also need to figure out a way to cut costs. Both of those things are necessary for the direction that we're headed in. And I think that is a conversation that the public should participate in. They need to understand, for example, I'll talk about the fleet. I love the fleet. We spend $8.5 million a year on vehicle maintenance and $5 million a year on new vehicles this year. Next year, it's going to be $3 million.
And this is something that now, likely incoming Mayor Corey O'Connor talked about a lot, was these emergency vehicles that are aging beyond their ability to function.
They literally break down with people in them. That's not an exaggeration. And obviously, your car could break down, my car could break, any car could break down. But there are instances quite often when people being transported are suffering from a true and sincere and dire emergency, and they need to get to a doctor.
I assume we're going to get sued at some point.
But that fleet and the amount we're spending on repair versus the amount that we're spending on new vehicles, I think is pretty symbolic of the situation that we're in financially, because we need to figure out how to invert those numbers, right? Because if you invest heavily in a new fleet, you're spending a lot less on maintenance and your costs go down in the long run. So I think that needs to be a priority for the city and for city council and for this mayor and the next mayor. And, because if you're transporting people or having trash picked up, your trucks need to work, period.
Yeah. That's something we need. Another thing that we should be spending money on, perhaps in a different way. What should we be cutting?
So I think it sucks, right? There's not a lot of places where you're just let's get rid of this or let's get rid of that. I think we need to make sure that we are spending in the most efficient way possible. If there are ways to pair a medic with an EMT, which we're doing, and is actually a cost-saving measure.
You mean combining jobs?
Combining units, right? So
Okay.
if you have instead of needing 2 medics on a truck, you can have a medic and an EMT, and that is totally safe for a patient, and it actually does save money. I think that there are ways too that we are recognizing where technology can improve, and I am a huge proponent of integrating technology and a new way of thinking into, data-driven solutions for service delivery. I was at an AI conference in Pittsburgh last fall, and a city council person in Nashville said that they put these sensors, and I'm not the person to describe technology, on their trash trucks, and then they proactively could go out and fix potholes. Because when the sensor shook on the trash truck, they knew that was a pothole. And they put them on police vehicles too, I think, and other like city cars, and they could just proactively go out, and it actually saves a lot of time if you're collecting data about potholes that is like instant.
We talked to somebody over at DPW who said, he just gets like the 311 calls all day, every day. That's not efficient?
Correct. And I think too, like when you look at cost savings, would spending more money in the fleet tomorrow save costs a year from now? Yes, right? Because you're not paying for maintenance on a 15-year-old vehicle or 20-year-old vehicle. I mean, the scuba truck that the medics have turns 40 this year. It was a joke for a week or two that I was going to have a 40th birthday party for this scuba truck.
Are you talking about like an actual scuba? Like scuba goes into the river?
No, it looks more like an ambulance, and I will actually text it to you.
I can't wait to see the photo of this. Thank you.
Yeah, but we're going to do, like, that was the joke, is that we're going to have a 40th birthday party for this scuba truck. And it's in an emergency situation, if someone is stuck in a vehicle, typically that would be what happened, is someone, ends up off a bridge, a car is submerged, and there's a person in it.
I feel like that's a fear that literally every Pittsburgher has in some way.
I think about it every time
when you go over a bridge, you're like, what's my escape plan? Yes. It doesn't make me feel better about that scenario to know that the vehicle that would potentially save someone is also maybe not well.
Yeah, it was built during the Ronald Reagan administration. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the cuts that you're talking about, like that's an example, like talking about like the fleet and the sensors and things like that. Like those aren't what I think a lot of us think of as like an austerity measure. It's more like a shifting of resources to have like long-term savings.
The easier solution when you look at how we're spending money is to grow, so you don't have to have these drastic draconian cuts to city services in 5 or 7 years. So if you can figure out how to grow, that is a much easier solution to deal with. And yeah, it does create problems. Like, where are all these people going to live? We have an old housing stock. We don't build enough. We just did an IZ report. We released it earlier
Inclusionary zoning. Also talked about that a lot out here.
But our report, I have a colleague who worked on this report for more than 6 months. And the conclusion we came to was that we don't build enough to even know if this works or not, and if it's good or not.
Yeah, the joke I've heard so many times in city planning contexts is like, you can judge the health of a city by how many cranes are in the skyline. Yeah. That's not a thing Pittsburgh tends to have.
Correct. And that is literally I think my quote said was, we need shovels in the ground. Yeah. And what can we do to incentivize development? Because of the earlier part of our conversation where we talked about how this is happening to every city. One, the city doesn't have the capital to invest in a lot of these projects on their own. We just don't, right? And two, it's been well documented that the city of Pittsburgh is a terrible landlord. So those two issues.
What do you mean by terrible?
So when you look at the housing authority, right, we are not a good landlord. When you look at houses that are owned by the city that we want to move to the land bank, they are not well maintained. And a lot of that has to do with the allocation of resources, and we just don't have the money to do that. But we need to make sure that we recognize that if we want to turn X building from a commercial space into a residential space, we literally do not have the capital to do that as a city, right? We need private investment. Yes, it should be a community-driven conversation. Yes, we should make sure that it's an inclusive project. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're not scaring away private capital, because there are literally 30 other buildings that look just like that in every peer city that Pittsburgh has, probably 2 or 3. So whatever we can do to incentivize that development, I think is really important, because we literally do not have the capital to handle those projects on our own.
Today's show is brought to you by Overlook Maps. If you need an easier way to remember that amazing little cafe you found last summer, or a perfect hiking spot that your friend told you about, I have good news for you. With Overlook Maps, special places never get lost again. You can create personal lists of places you've been or want to go. Build your must-visit list for your next vacation, your favorite restaurants for nights out, or your getaway ideas when you need to escape. I have personally been DIYing this exact thing since I was in college using Google Maps, and y'all, that is not what Google is best at. My lists are kind of a mess, completely dependent on the notes I did or did not remember remember to write down at the time. And until now, it was my only way to record all the cool things I had done or wanted to do. I am so excited because Overlook Maps has solved for something I have wanted in my life for years. It's a way to remember, to categorize, to find the best spots for me and my crew, because they have so many curated layers that you can check out, from Michelin guides to the New York Times and eater recommendations. You can even make your own private lists, keep your own secrets, or share with friends and collaborate about the places that you are most excited to check out as a group. You can even put in food preferences, and Overlook Maps will make the recommendations. And they have a routing feature that will tell you where you can eat in the direction that you are already headed. I have been begging the universe for this thing for so long, and Overlook Maps has delivered. Icing on the cake, there are no ads. No one's selling your data to advertisers, just amazing spaces and places organized exactly how you want them. Overlook Maps. Collect, organize, and share the places that matter to you. Download it for free at overlookmaps.com and check out overlookmaps.com/Pittsburgh to see some of our favorite spots on a map and in your pocket. Your places, your way.
So good, so good, so good.
Ready to rack to school and save big? Get to your Nordstrom Rack store today for thousands of deals from just $20.
Because I want to look fresh.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
I got a new backpack.
Score everyone's favorite denim, sneakers, boots, and activewear from Nike, Levi's, Steve Madden, Madewell, and Free People. Great brands, great prices. Everyone's got a reason to rack. Shop Nordstrom Rack and make it the best school year ever.
Let's talk about Act 47, because I feel like for a lot of people that, I mean, in my circles, in my very nerdy circles, that's like kind of the worst case scenario here, because it's a receivership program through the state. It kind of puts us on a leash. City Council has to approve it. And it is something that Pittsburgh has been through very recently. It was from 2003 to 2018. Took us 15 years to exit this program. Are we going to go through that again?
I don't think that needs to be our destiny. I do think that smart leadership, smart growth, inclusive growth, smart spending, and making sure that our priorities include like this re-envisioning of what Pittsburgh can be is absolutely necessary. We need to make sure that we are approaching economic growth and the growth of this population. I mean, those are one and the same, I guess. But we need to make sure that we are being exceptionally mindful. And we need to be yes people. I don't know if you remember, I think it was 2009, 10, the Obama administration did a first-time homebuyer federal, and you literally got $10,000 back the day you bought your house. Not the day, but,
really quickly, yeah.
Shockingly quickly. And I was not in a position to buy a house then.
Nor was I.
So I didn't get to benefit from it. But if we could do that for 2 or 3 years and capture some of these college kids, because the likelihood of someone staying once they own a house is much higher than if you're not pursuing that. And I also think you need to make sure that a program like that isn't just for recent college graduates. It needs to be first-time homebuyers, right? So it's inclusive. But I do think that a program like that, and we have our foundation assets.
You mean the Pittsburgh Foundation?
Yeah, family foundations.
Yeah.
Is worth in excess of $15 billion. I mean, why doesn't the city pursue a partnership with these, I think there are 20 really big ones. They are rooted in Pittsburgh, right? What if you did a 5-year, ask them, can you put money into our capital account that we can spend down? Because vehicles are capital expenses too.
I mean, the foundation community here in Pittsburgh, though, is they're famously opposed to contributing to general funds. Even for the smallest organization on up, they want to know that they are contributing to a project, to an output, to something that they can tangibly see and point to as a success. Just handing over money is never been their thing.
What's interesting though, and this is the conversation, because after we went into Act 47 in 2007, 8, and 9, our pilot payments that the city
payments in lieu of taxes,
correct? Thank you. Were
that's the thing that we keep talking about, that Gainey has been trying to get the big 4 nonprofits to do.
But you're not going to get that through litigation at all, and that has been the conduit that they have continued to pursue to reach a pilot agreement. And I don't think we'll get there through suing people. There are two entities that determine your tax status. One's the state, one's the federal government. The city of Pittsburgh has no say over who is or isn't a nonprofit. So I would love to see, and I totally agree that any agreement like that needs to contribute to the direct operation of city government, but it can be fleet. You know what I mean? If you went to these groups and said, can we send you whatever this looks like, a reimbursement for the city's fleet at the end of the year, it'll be audited by the controller's office.
See, now you sound like you're echoing our likely incoming mayor.
I've been saying it a lot longer than he has.
Then I'll give you the credit.
So,
That's just
thank
fine.
you.
He's had a louder megaphone lately. That's all.
Yes, that's totally true. But I do think that we need to have honest conversations about revenue. The fleet situation is dire. I was on a medic truck in February. I do ride-alongs with public safety. It was like being on the...
You're gripping the chair.
It was like being on the Thunderbolt. And I'm thinking, if you're in a hospital bed, I mean, this would be uncomfortable. You know, I mean, I'm uncomfortable and I'm buckled in.
I was about to say, I assume you were in the rumble seat.
Yes.
There's a seatbelt involved.
There was a seatbelt. I'm a big proponent of vehicle safety. But when your ambulance is from 2005, that's what an ambulance from 2005 feels like. So I just think that it's important to make sure the vehicles, particularly with public safety, but also with public works, right? Because these are the cars and trucks that people see most. Like, hopefully you never need 911. Hopefully you never need to get in a city ambulance. But chances are you do need your trash picked up. And we need to make sure that those vehicles can get there. And just the comment on the similarity between the likely incoming mayor and I with the nonprofits and foundations, for that matter. I have been saying this since I started in the controller's office, because I was like, wait, why don't we figure this out? And I believe that it's in the best interest of everyone to just figure out something that works for all of us. Because I think it's a bad outcome to say, well, they said this and I said this, so there's no progress.
Is that something that your office can contribute to?
Yes. And I have met with most of the large foundations. I've met with all 5 of the nonprofits. I've tried to create an ongoing dialogue about city finances with the public, and particularly with the nonprofits, because they're such a significant employer within the city. And what's changing with them impacts us. I mean, you saw at Pitt, there's a hiring freeze, and the impact of foreign students coming to CMU and Pitt, and cuts to Medicare and Medicaid at Allegheny Health Network and at UPMC.
And all of this stuff is happening from the federal level and down. We're just having to weather it.
Yeah, but if they aren't going to hire, I mean, people who live in the city pay a wage tax. That's a significant hit to city finances indirectly, but it still is. And I think that those conversations are important. And, you know, the changes to federal spending and the proposals from this administration are going to impact the city directly and indirectly, but maintaining a dialogue, I think, is super important. And, from my perspective, I am glad that there are other people that see that this is an opportunity.
So with all this in mind, then, can Pittsburgh go broke?
Yes.
What does that look like?
I don't know. To me, the biggest priority of a municipal government is to keep people safe, and secondarily, to keep things clean. So I think that the public shouldn't expect any changes at any point ever to public safety. We've talked about the police staffing shortage and the medic staffing shortage, and those are national problems. And I think continuing to proactively take steps to address those issues is important.
I imagine that doesn't change, right? Like, our biggest expenditure is going to stay public safety, all of their salaries, no matter what they're staffed at, it'll be overtime or it'll be salary. Mm-hmm. And our biggest source of revenue is property taxes, which keep going down.
So it's property taxes and wage taxes. 50%.
Yeah.
So I actually think the biggest vulnerability facing the city is the school district, because when you look right now, I think 55% of K through 12 school-age children attend Pittsburgh public schools, and 45% attend private schools if they live in the city of Pittsburgh, right? So if your kid goes to a religious school, a parochial school, a charter school, a private school, is homeschooled, whatever, that represents 45% of all city families. And we need to make sure that Pittsburgh Public Schools is remaining a destination school district. I mean, when you look...
Remaining.
Correct.
I don't want to dog on them, but I don't know that anyone considers them a destination school district in this moment.
So I would agree with you. When you look at Pittsburgh in the 80s and 90s, it was one of the last urban school districts where CEOs were sending their kids to the same public high school as public works employees or, someone who maybe is a blue collar, job, right?
And there are wonderful teachers there. There are some really good schools, but as a whole, their outcomes are not what a lot of parents are looking for.
And there's a racial achievement gap. I mean, we have a lot of structural issues with PPS. We spend so much per student, but we need to make sure that PPS stays afloat and that they are providing the robust, comprehensive education that every student and family is entitled to on behalf of their children.
Yeah. I mean, but how does that factor into that question of like, as someone who studies the books,
right?
What does that mean though? Like how do you go broke as a city? Because like, are you defaulting on loans? Like, what does that mean to an average Pittsburgher?
Well, what I think would immediately, if we went into Act 47,
And Act 47 is like a cascading amount of events. Like city council has to actually initiate it. I once heard someone say that Act 47 is really just like a mechanism to force city leaders into doing things that are politically unpopular because you have to make like a lot of hard decisions, but then you get to blame the state for it.
Yeah, they're very correct is what I would say. But mechanically, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know what that looks like in this era of municipal government. I mean, my goal is to do everything I can to prevent that from happening. My big worry, too, is that we are overburdening city residents with the cost of city government, right? If 50% of all city revenue comes from wage and property taxes, it comes from people who live here. And that's one reason parking taxes in Pittsburgh, again, which you don't know you pay because you just pay the meter, you pay the kiosk or the
app.
Yeah. It's one of the only ways that we can actually derive revenue from people who come here from out of the city, right? Is you're paying, that's why it costs sometimes $40 or $50 to park downtown for the day, if you drive in from Cranberry, that's how we capture some revenue. But we need to grow. Like there are practical reasons to have conversations about how do you cut costs, but I think structuring these conversations around managing decline is unhealthy because I don't think we're lost, right? I don't think this is over, but I do think managing growth is the way we need to approach this. And how do we figure out how to grow?
How much of all this do you put at the feet of Mayor Gainey? Outgoing Mayor Ed Gainey, he lost the election. Is he responsible for any of this?
I don't, and I'm being very honest, I just don't think of things that way. Like, I think that there are spending priorities that I would have pursued if I was in a different position, but we are not a budgeting office.
The controller's office.
Correct. So the controller's office is not a budgeting entity. So we approve revenue. Our audits are intended to inform the conversation around city spending. And, do I think that there are, for example, we send the URA $10 million a year for the Housing Opportunity Fund. I obviously think that's a huge priority because we need to make sure that we're creating opportunity for people to live in the city. And that's what the URA does with this program. But last year, at the end of the year, at the end of 23, they had $25 million sitting in the bank. So rather than send them another $10 million this year, should we be spending that $10 million on fleet and allow them to get caught up with their projects, right? But it's not my nature to think of things like that. Like, I don't walk around and say, this is your fault, this is your fault, this is your fault. I don't do that at home. It's just not who I am. I am solutions oriented. I've always been that way, which is
probably great for your personal relationships. I mean, let's turn it around though. Like, is there something that you would like to see maybe city council, for example, do in the next 1 to 2 to 4 years?
I think evaluating every contract, because they approve every contract and appropriation of funds.
That's the thing. And even the budget. If the budget is a problem, that's okay. But we can amend the budget. We can make changes.
Yeah. So I forget when my budget hearing was, December 1st, I think it was Councilman Mosley said, what are you most concerned about in this budget? I'm like, actually, no one's asked me before. Thank you. And
people are afraid to ask the controller what they're afraid of.
And so I said, we haven't adequately budgeted for overtime. And it's particularly true with police and EMS. And then no one did anything with it. Everybody was there. And we also have an overtime issue with fire. We've been spending a ton on fire because we have 4 additional stations open because of construction projects that require us to have additional staffing at particular stations. And no, we didn't even have a fire budget hearing. So for me, I think being proactive is super important for the people who are making these decisions. And looking at the cost of a contract, I'll give this example. I've complained extensively about the fleet, but we had a contract before us in 2023 that would have given our vendor a 15-year, $150 million contract. That's crazy, right? And we have had ongoing issues with this vendor. We've done audits. You can look them up on our website. And anecdotally, I hear from people all the time about this vendor. Our office is having issues with paperwork and documentation. And then Controller Michael Lamb and I, as deputy, sent a letter to council and said, why are you appropriating $150 million over 15 years? Like, pump the brakes, guys. And thankfully, our engagement did yield a 7-year, I think $54 million agreement. So it's hard because when you see one contract come before you, it's like, okay, well, this is what it costs, right? But when you look at things in the aggregate and you're like, wow, that we have appropriated all this money, and the controller's office signs off on all agreements that the city has. So I think like scrutinizing that level is actually what's most important at this point. And that comes from the administration too. I mean, I think if they're going to enter into a contract or recommend we enter into an agreement with a nonprofit, or, you need to make sure that the way that money is being spent is in alignment with the city's priorities.
Do you think that we should raise taxes?
I believe we have other options.
At least to explore first?
Yes.
What do you wish people understood more about the work that you do?
I wish people understood that we are trying to, because on Twitter and Facebook and the neighborhood groups, you're like, the city's wasting money here, the city's wasting money there. We are trying to address those problems. So there is an office they can call, 412-255-2055. We have a controller's office, Sherpa, and her job she's awesome, is to help people navigate city government and get answers. I think one thing that is important that I have reiterated in our office is if you call the controller's office, you are at your wit's end. We need to get you to an answer. And our office exists to do that, right? I want to help people fix the problem that they're dealing with. And I think that being in this office is truly like this awesome responsibility, right? Most people will interact with the federal government directly. Social Security issues, passports, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security when they're older. Most people interact with their state government a couple times a year, getting a new license, real ID chaos. But you interact with your local government literally every day. You do, no matter what you do for work or where you go. And I believe in government. I believe it's a force for good. I believe it's a tool that people should be able to use and rely on. And if you can influence how people view that local level of government, I do believe that will change how they view the rest of government.
Rachel, thank you so much for trying to explain city finances to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
That is all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. Since we recorded this conversation, the hiring freeze at Pitt has ended, at least for now. And if you want to dig into any more of this, Controller Heisler has brought the receipts. Like, for real, she loves a budget. We will link to her full report in our show notes. We will be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. We'll talk to you soon.
Go to the city county building. I mean, that building needs literally $100 million in work.
What was it? There was a toilet that exploded not too long ago.
Yeah, there has been, I'm not going to go into all the incidents that we've seen in the bathrooms, but like the women's bathroom in the controller's office has black mold and a hole in the ceiling. And the drywall is probably from when FDR was president.